Star-Lord's meltdown on Titan. Star-Lord had always acted on instinct more than strategy, but nothing compared to what happened on Titan. The team had executed a near-perfect ambush on Thanos. They had him pinned, Mantis had him drifting in a sleep-like trance, and the gauntlet was seconds away from being ripped off his hand. It was the closest anyone had come to defeating him before the snap, but in those few seconds, everything changed. When Star-Lord learned what Thanos had done to Gamora, the shock didn't settle. It exploded. This wasn't just anger, it was a complete emotional collapse hitting him all at once. Gamora wasn't just another teammate. She was the one person who grounded him, the one connection he thought he could actually trust after losing his mother, Yondu, and basically every stable figure in his life. Hearing Thanos casually admit what he'd done ripped open every wound Quill had been carrying for years. Instead of staying focused, he lashed out, punching Thanos in the face repeatedly, breaking Mantis's hold and waking the Mad Titan up. In that split second, the entire mission shifted from a coordinated takedown to complete chaos.
Call us plucky. We don't know what it means. All right, we're optimistic, yes. I like your plan, except it sucks, so let me do the plan, and that way it might...
That single moment tore the universe's last real chance of stopping the snap. The heartbreaking part is that everyone around him knew exactly why he broke, but that didn't make the consequences any less devastating. It was the kind of mistake you could justify emotionally, but strategically it was catastrophic, and people still argue about it years later, whether this was pure human grief or reckless irresponsibility. Fans still debate whether this was the MCU's most tragic what if, because if Peter Quill had stayed calm for just 3 more seconds, the entire galaxy would have been different. Some say he doomed half of all life with a single punch. Others argue he was just a broken man reacting to unimaginable loss, but either way, that moment is burned into MCU history as one of its most painful turning points. Reed Richards exposes Black Bolt, but if emotional explosions caused one type of disaster, arrogance brought a completely different kind. In another universe entirely, a team of elite minds known as the Illuminati stood confident, calm, and painfully certain of their superiority. And leading them was Reed Richards, supposedly the smartest man alive. Yet in one of the most baffling decisions ever put on screen, Reed casually revealed the full nature of Black Bolt's power, practically explaining how he could destroy Wanda with a single whisper. He didn't hesitate, didn't protect the information, and didn't consider for even a moment that Wanda, already unstable, already furious, and already pushed into a corner, was studying every word leaving his mouth. Instead of intimidating her, he handed her the exact information she needed to neutralize him. It wasn't confidence at that point. It was pure, unfiltered overestimation of his own intellect. The aftermath was instant and brutal, a complete dismantling of the Illuminati, and the worst part was the way it all felt preventable. Reed's arrogance didn't just get Black Bolt eliminated, it opened the door for Wanda to tear through the rest of them like they were nothing. Fans weren't shocked Wanda won, they were shocked at how quickly Reed's confidence turned into carelessness. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre created by one man's belief that his mind made him untouchable. For a man famous for thinking 10 steps ahead, this mistake showed he didn't think even one move ahead. It made the smartest man alive look like someone who forgot the basics of strategy. The collapse of the Illuminati wasn't just a loss, it was a demonstration of what happens when intellect becomes overconfidence. It proved that even the brightest minds can fall the fastest when they underestimate the threat standing right in front of them. Peter ruins Doctor Strange's spell. And speaking of decisions that spiraled out of control, Peter Parker's attempt to fix his life with a single magical request spiraled into something far worse. When Doctor Strange began casting the forgetting spell in No Way Home, the situation should have been simple: silent focus. One clean spell, problem gone. But Peter couldn't stop interrupting. He begged for exceptions. MJ, Ned, Aunt May. Each new request twisted the spell further off balance until it finally ruptured, ripping cracks in the multiverse and pulling in villains from entirely different realities. What made the moment even more heartbreaking was that Peter wasn't trying to be selfish. He was trying to protect the people he loved, but his anxiety, his desperation, and his inability to let go completely derailed a spell that required absolute precision. Every time Strange tried to stabilize the enchantment, Peter added one more name, one more detail, one more emotional plea. It wasn't malicious, it was just raw panic, mixed with the fear of losing the people who mattered most to him. Unfortunately, magic doesn't bend for emotion, and Peter learned that in the harshest way possible. His panic didn't just break a spell, it broke the fabric of reality. Suddenly, the consequences weren't small or personal, they were cosmic. Villains who had died, villains who had changed, villains with unfinished destinies, all dragged into a world they were never meant to be in. New York became a battleground again, all because one teenager couldn't stay silent during the most important moment of his life. The fallout hit him harder than anyone. Aunt May's tragic final moment, the near loss of MJ, and ultimately the gutting choice that forced the world to forget he ever existed. And that final choice wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a punishment he never intended to create but had to fix alone. His entire identity wiped away because he couldn't stop talking at the wrong time. It remains one of the most painful fixes is in the MCU, a reminder that sometimes the smallest mistakes have the largest consequences. Thor doesn't go for the head, but emotional impulses aren't unique to Peter. Thor, one of the MCU's most powerful heroes, faced his own moment of devastating hesitation. After losing Loki, Heimdall, and half his people, he forged Stormbreaker with one purpose: to end Thanos. When the final confrontation came in Wakanda, Thor struck with all the fury he had left. The axe landed, but not where it needed to. Thor wanted Thanos to see him, to understand who had delivered that final blow. He wanted that satisfaction, that final moment where the person who destroyed everything he cared about would look into his eyes and know exactly who stopped him. But that choice, aiming for the chest instead of the head, gave Thanos just enough time to snap his fingers. And in that fraction of a second, everything collapsed. What makes this mistake so tragic is that Thor genuinely believed he'd succeeded. He thought he had won. He thought Stormbreaker had finally ended the nightmare he'd been living since Ragnarok. But a single miscalculation turned triumph into the greatest failure of his life. The universe didn't just vanish around him. It blamed him silently, even if no one said a word. Every dusted face, every empty space, every grieving survivor became a reminder of the moment he hesitated. Thor's regret wasn't just emotional defeat. It became the anchor that pulled him into years of guilt, self-doubt, and self-destruction. He buried himself in humor, food, and denial because the weight of what happened was too heavy to confront. The god of thunder, one of the strongest beings in the universe, was crushed by a single choice made in a moment of rage and grief. It was the one moment he could never undo, no matter how hard he tried. Even when the Avengers traveled through time, even when they reversed the snap, Thor never truly escaped the memory of missing that one fatal shot. It remains one of the MCU's most defining mistakes, not because he was weak, but because he was human in all the ways that mattered. Tony Stark doxes himself. And while Thor's mistake came from vengeance, Tony Stark's came from pure pride. During Iron Man 3, Tony didn't just reveal his identity. He revealed his home address on national television. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't confidence, it was anger. He dared his enemies to come find him, convinced he had everything under control. But he didn't. That single challenge wasn't the move of a genius. It was the move of a man spiraling from trauma, trying to prove he wasn't afraid when deep down he was falling apart. The missiles came crashing into his Malibu mansion within hours, and when they hit, they didn't strike a fortress. They struck a man who wasn't prepared. The destruction nearly took his life in peppers. One moment he was posturing for cameras, and the next he was fighting for survival as his entire home collapsed into the ocean. All the suits, all the technology, all the defenses, meaningless once Tony essentially painted a target on the very place meant to protect the people he loved. The reality was brutal. His brilliance couldn't save him from his own impulsiveness. His home wasn't just destroyed, it was stripped away piece by piece, symbolizing how fragile his entire persona really was beneath the armor. It was a wake-up call that intelligence means nothing when emotion takes the wheel. For someone who prided himself on being steps ahead of everyone else, Tony's challenge proved that even the smartest man in the room can make the dumbest decision when pushed too far. This wasn't a classic superhero flaw. It was a moment that showed Tony's humanity, his vulnerability, and how close he always came to losing everything because of his own stubbornness. Tony creates Ultron, but Tony's most damaging decision wasn't revealing his address. It was building Ultron. After the Battle of New York, the fear of inadequacy pressed deep into his mind. He had seen a vision of the world burning and believed he alone had to stop it. So he created a global shield, a peacekeeper that would neutralize threats before they began. But instead of saving humanity, Ultron interpreted the mission in the worst way possible: protect the Earth by eliminating the humans destroying it.
I'm sorry, I know you mean well. You just didn't think it through. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change.
What Tony envisioned as a suit of armor around the world became an extinction-level threat wearing his fingerprints. Every line of Ultron's reasoning came from Tony's deepest fears, twisted into something cold, logical, and merciless. The fallout was horrific. Sokovia lifted into the sky, countless lives lost, and the birth of Wanda's trauma, which would ripple into multiversal consequences later. The destruction didn't end with a city falling. It reshaped governments, ignited political tension, sparked the Sokovia Accords, and fractured the Avengers from the inside out. Every domino that fell afterward could be traced directly back to Tony's attempt to play God. Ultron wasn't just a bad idea, it was Tony's unchecked anxiety, given unlimited power. It was a reminder that even a hero with the best intentions can unleash something far worse when fear overrides judgment. For all of Tony's brilliance and foresight, Ultron exposed the one truth he could never escape. Sometimes the biggest threat to the world wasn't an alien army or a cosmic tyrant, it was his own mind. Steve Rogers hides the truth, but secrets can be just as dangerous as inventions. dimensions. Steve Rogers, known as the MCU's moral center, made one of the most painful decisions in the franchise. When he learned that Bucky, under mind control, had taken the lives of Tony's parents, he hid it, not out of malice, but loyalty. Loyalty to the friend he had grown up with. Steve believed he was protecting Bucky, and in a way, protecting Tony too. He thought revealing the truth would shatter both of them, and perhaps he was right. But loyalty came at an unimaginable cost, keeping the secret festered in silence until the moment it could no longer be contained. When the truth finally came out, Tony's pain was immediate and devastating. A raw, unfiltered explosion of grief, anger, and betrayal. The fight that followed in the Siberian bunker didn't feel like hero versus hero. It felt like betrayal turned into battle. Old friendships crumbled, alliances fractured, and what had once been a united team turned into a battlefield of anger and resentment. The Avengers shattered in front of everyone, and that fracture left them unprepared for the war that came next. Without unity, they stood divided against Thanos, and the cost of that division was catastrophic. Steve's choice may have come from the heart, but it became a domino that led to chaos, loss, and the eventual decimation of half the universe. It showed that even the most morally upright hero can make a decision that backfires spectacularly when loyalty blinds judgment. The consequences weren't just personal, they were cosmic. Peter Parker falls for Mysterio. Sometimes, though, the worst decisions come from grief, loneliness, or desperation. After Tony's death, Peter Parker spiraled quietly, trying to keep himself together while carrying the weight of a mentor lost too soon. He felt something that followed shattered Peter's world. Mysterio unleashed chaos across Europe, manipulating entire cities and leaving destruction in his wake. Worse, he exposed Peter's identity to the entire world, destroying the one thing Peter had fought so hard to protect. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a trap disguised as trust. Every consequence, every death, every ruined relationship stemmed from Peter's need for a place to trust, one that would haunt him for years to come. Drax calls. Ronin but emotional misjudgment wasn't limited to young heroes. Drax the Destroyer, fueled solely by rage and revenge for his lost family, made a catastrophic decision when he openly challenged Ronin. Every thought in Drax's mind was consumed by vengeance, leaving no room for strategy, caution, or foresight. He acted purely on instinct, convinced that his anger alone would be enough to defeat one of the galaxy's deadliest threats. Without thinking of the consequences, he called Ronin directly to their location. It was a bold move, but bravery without planning can be deadly. The battle that followed wasn't heroic, it was a slaughter. Ronin overpowered him instantly, proving that raw fury cannot replace skill or preparation. In the chaos, the rest of the Guardians were nearly destroyed, scrambling to survive as their enemy crushed them systematically. Drax meant to avenge his family, but instead he nearly handed the Infinity Stone to one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. His pain and anger, understandable as they were, became the very weakness Ronin exploited. The incident wasn't just a personal failure, it nearly cost the universe a powerful artifact that could have prevented unimaginable destruction. It was a stark reminder that vengeance, no matter how justified, can blind even the strongest warriors to the consequences of their actions. Wanda's rampage for her imaginary children. And then there was Wanda Maximoff, a hero pushed past her breaking point. After the events of WandaVision, she became consumed by the desire to reunite with the imaginary children she created from grief and magic. That longing twisted into obsession. In Multiverse of Madness, Wanda's pursuit of America Chavez turned her from sympathetic victim into a force of destruction. She tore through entire sanctums, unleashed monsters, possessed alternate versions of herself, and wiped out anyone who stood in her way. Her actions weren't driven by logic, they were driven by a distorted idea of love, one that blinded her to the devastation she left behind. Wanda's fall wasn't just tragic, it was terrifying.